Hey, welcome back everybody. Jeff Frick here, coming to you from the Egen Lounge at the House of Blues in Mandalay Bay. We're here at Google Cloud Next talking all thing agentic AI, because that is really where we are now. We're past chatbots. If you're still on chatbots, you're a little bit behind. So we're excited to talk to one of the guys who's really pushing the edge and out there with customers and coming up with frameworks and blueprints and ways to organize this. So we're really excited to have on. He's Justin Hartung, the VP of Innovation for Egen. Justin, great to have you.
Hi Jeff, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just jump into this thing. Velocity Blueprint. What is it all about?
Well, the Velocity Blueprint is really helping companies understand what it is they need in order to build and use AI throughout their organization. Think of it just like you're building a house. You need to have the plumbing blueprint, you need to have the electric plan, you need to have the floor plan. If you don't have those well articulated, then anyone that's building something in that house for that house is having a really hard time and having to figure it out from scratch.
Okay. So the elements of the blueprint, if we think of the house analogy, right? So there's the what is it, but then there's all the pieces that all the subs have to bring to put the house together, the plumbing, the HVAC, the electrical. So how does that kind of map back to my computer infrastructure?
Sure, so at every company, there's a lot of technology decisions that were made, and that's what they've already anchored their environment on.
Right.
So we kind of say, like, given the anchors that you have, what are the additional things that you might need to add to your house, in this analogy, in order to unlock maybe a new type of room or a new type of agentic use cases. Right. So this allows you to go and figure out, and select what use cases are you trying to enable, and then very quickly show you what gaps you have and helps you guide you through the decision process of what technologies might you choose.
So do you put some kind of a sniffer, you have some kind of analysis process to know kind of what their infrastructure is comprised of and what are all the components that you're going to potentially leverage for that solution?
Yeah, today we don't, but that is definitely a natural evolution of this. Right now it really takes about 5 minutes to go through and start creating it once someone understands it. So we don't see this as being the biggest roadblock, but what it does enable is it allows people to have conversations with each other of what is it that we're looking at, rather than trying to debate about what tools are actually needed.
Right, and I'm curious, right, there's been such an effort since big data and Hadoop, and go back as long as you want, in terms of people getting their data together and getting their data structures together and breaking down data silos. I'm curious, when you first go through that assessment and fire up the blueprint, are they 80% of the way there they need to be? Are they 70% of the way? Or, are they hopefully not at 20% of the way they need to be? Well, from their data infrastructure point of view.
A bit of each. So what I will say is that, and I'm glad you mentioned data, because when we think of AI, we don't just think of AI as a standalone thing. It has to live on top of layers.
Right.
Again, why we have layers of the blueprint. So think of your cloud plumbing foundations, and on top of that you have your data platform. And if you don't have the ability to publish your data in a governed way, then whatever you build on top of it, it starts to hallucinate potential different schemas and not really give you accurate answers. And even worse, companies get different agents that are being built by different business users that all will say different answers for the same question. Like, what was our P&L last month? Because that might be encoded differently based on how they come together. So what we're finding is that it really depends. The companies that are ahead are the ones that have kind of always been ahead in technology, where they're looking at technology as a differentiator and a core capability of how it enables them. They usually have already put in a lot of investment into this, and they're really looking on the top layer, like, how do we now tackle the AI? But sadly, there's still a lot of companies that we come to that don't have a way to publish and understand the data that exists, how it's being used, or even how to add or contribute more data to this entire ecosystem.
Well, there was a comment from an earlier guest talking about intention-based computing versus instruction-based computing, which I thought is so insightful. What do I want? And then you go figure out what you need to pull together to deliver that for me.
I would consider it also, my other terminology is spec-driven development.
Spec-driven development.
And so, but just the intent is that you start, and this is one of the beautiful things about AI. If you think about traditional programming, a developer would take the inputs and the specifications, or the requirements, and they would create that translation from the inputs to the outputs. With AI, you have the opportunity to say, here's my inputs and here's my outputs, and it will create that black box for you. Now with generative AI, you're able to bring in, what is it I want to accomplish, my intent, and then the system will make it happen for you.
Right.
The problem is that when everybody's intent in their head is different, and if you don't have the right structured tools in place to help put the guardrails, that could end up being a different outcome. And as we know, is if you have a lot of really smart people in a company, but you don't have a cohesion way of working together, you end up with chaos.
Right.
That's what's happening right now with a lot of these intent-driven development, is that everybody's intent is locally optimized for them, but not globally optimized. And so again, if you think about the blueprint, it's about how do you bring all the stitching together so that when you're building that house, it's in a consistent way, or you're building that agent, it's done in a way that conforms with your governance, your compliance.
That's funny. I've heard the phrase shadow AI as a new scary problem, and also gray code as a new scary problem, because no one's quite sure what the code is in there. But just talk about the progression that we've gone through and what you're seeing with the customers in terms of where we were a couple years ago, which was basically, kind of Google search on steroids, and then we got to kind of the chatbots, and a lot of people have had experience there. So now giving these things the ability to take action. And what are you hearing from kind of the senior leaders at the company? Not necessarily the tech leaders, but people are like, do we really want to give over? How do we keep the guardrails? How do we make sure this thing, stays where we want it?
I don't talk as many business leaders as you might, but the ones I do talk to, they're even trying to figure out what does AI mean for my company? So they're early stages. There are some companies I run into where some executives have actually used AI in a meaningful way. And I'd say one of the biggest, if I think of a continuum from dabbling your feet in it or using a chatbot or knowing it exists to now starting to delegate work to it, that's where you're referring to is businesses said it's okay to give up some control and some decision making to an algorithmic process.
Right.
Which is the same it's always been. Think about OCR. That's just an algorithmic process to see what is in a document. So it's not much of an advance over that.
Right.
It just gets more broadly. Though the next stage that I think is where the real unlock is how do you start to think of AI more as a coworker, where you're delegating fully capabilities to it, and that includes coding. And yes, gray code is a good term. But what's also even more interesting is that it's becoming so good that I don't even know if in a year from now engineers really have to write a line of code anymore, because today is the worst the tools are going to ever get. The challenge is that, back to that intent, is when you say, go do something for me, it finds, in well-intentioned ways, what are all the paths to get it done.
Right.
So you end up with maybe the right intents, but then done the wrong way. So a really good example from a security perspective is when you're coding something and it needs to download a library, it may pull a library that ends up being a malware that then opens up your whole environment. So the challenge that I see companies grapple with is the landscape of risk and security is changing so rapidly, they don't even know how to begin to measure it and understand, and nobody in the industry really knows how to protect against it.
Interesting. So when they're going through this blueprint process, I would imagine, you tell me if I'm wrong, most of them start out thinking about saving money, right? Moving manual processes to automation and saving money. At some point in time, they're like, wow, we could do what? I could do that? And then they're thinking about investment and growth. So share a little how that transformation happens at the client side as they get their hands dirty working with these tools.
I'd say, I like to call it as a little t, is that the way that anybody really evolves their thought process isn't by just being anointed and saying you're an innovator or you're a transformer, but no, it's actually changing the behaviors and habits that impact them in really positive ways. So that kind of shift doesn't happen from the blueprint, and it's not really what it's meant for initially. When we run into companies in the blueprint, they're more debating over and over again about, I've got 5 different vendors that each tell me my software does everything I need for AI. And they have no common way of understanding which technology actually solves the immediate needs they have and doesn't fit in their environment. That's where the blueprint really comes in, is it helps take a conversation that's contentious and the smartest debater in the room into a common terminology.
A data conversation.
Yep,
right?
It's a data conversation, which is a lot less emotional, a lot less heated, and it starts to bring business users together that say, here's the use cases I want. The blueprint then shows, well, here's the capabilities you need, and here's the ones you already have technology in place, you just need to hook it together. So now we're only looking at 1 or 2 new capabilities you need, rather than the overwhelming, head of AI being told by the board that we need to enable AI everywhere.
Right.
We can now say, well, here's the 2 things we do right now to unlock this next set of use cases.
Yeah.
When you unlock those use cases and they start driving outcomes, that's when that shift happens. And that's where everyone should be trying to get to, is actually using it in a meaningful way to start you going from efficiency gain into an opportunity unlocker.
Right, and building.
Yeah.
The other thing, you showed me a little shot of it before we turned on the cameras, and I thought what was cool is that not only can you kind of do a query against the objective that you're working on now, but it'll come back and tell you, based on what you already have, here's other things you can do too. So
yes.
Actually suggesting new applications that maybe you didn't think of. I mean, do you see where they'll just be like almost like an app, I'll use App Store as an analogy, within an organization where it's not just IT that's making all the approved apps, but everybody's, or a lot of people are writing apps.
And I think it's what we're going to find is more and more business users are able to build these things. And so like you shouldn't be asking IT, what does the business need? You should be asking the business, what does the business need? And this is that opportunity of like, there's a whole menu of like, these are the common use cases that are being tackled. And so it's very easy to start mapping those out and say, well, our business process is really stitching together these 10 use cases that AI is well situated for. That then shows the tech people, well, here's the common patterns and here's the common technology you need. So it helps, again, bridge that conversation to, and to your point, like once you already have unlocked a bunch of use cases, you go and say, well, show me all the additional use cases I could go implement immediately given the technology I have in place.
Yeah, that's really cool. I saw you interviewed on another show and you made an interesting comment that a lot of times people think AI is magic and they're perceived as magic and it's this new thing, but your point was no, it's still machine learning and basically the same machine learning disciplines that you use for recommendation engine or other things are the same processes that you need to apply. It's really not that different, it's just kind of the next evolution, if you will.
Absolutely, and the skills that all the people that we are talking with that have spent decades, I'll call them in the salt mines of learning these skills the hard way, I like to think of the scars is what really creates the wisdom.
Right.
Those are still applicable, and like we shouldn't be throwing those out. We should actually be embracing them and just adding a bit more on and like because what AI is really probability outcomes.
Right.
Same thing with the LLMs is just it's a broader probability in language.
Right.
And so if you start thinking of that's all I'm adding on, then you could you don't throw out use cases, you don't throw out functions. Or unit tests, like these are all the same techniques, and if you could do something deterministically, absolutely, like a tool decision of should I look up an API or not, it's very easy to get overwhelmed by throwing everything in LLM, but I want people to just calm down, it's still an application you're developing. If you can do an if statement, do that. And then only when you need to bring in these deterministic, you bring it in and start building guardrails around it. What I find people start to be it's calming rather than overwhelming when every week you see all these new announcements and things changing rapidly.
Right, because I don't think it's clear, because people talk about it as a tool to get people to try to use it, and the first tool gets comped to a lot is a calculator, but calculators are deterministic. Every time I put in the same functions, it's going to give me the same answer. This technology by design will not. So how do people, they have to learn that it is math probability, it's not deterministic, yes or no.
Yep. I almost wish I could have a dimension that I measure for people of how much do they use AI is a dimension because you want to see are people adopting it, but then how much do they trust it without questioning and put the guardrails in place? And you might find that these leaders that look like they're being huge AI adopters, but they're just mindless people putting things in and using the outcome. What's much more important is like thinking through your problems you have.
Right.
And like a lot of people talk about hallucination and the challenges there. And immediately it's a completely negative context, but it really depends, as we were talking earlier too, it really depends on the problem you're trying to solve. We work with some institutions that are doing research to find proteins that can actually be bound to diseases. If you can do that, you can actually create a delivery mechanism and a cure to eradicate that disease.
Right.
Now, if we look at hallucination, which is saying, given this data, this pattern could exist here, in that case, you might want to say, well, hey, here's a protein I could create. If I was able to create it, it would be perfect. That's actually the exact problem of drug discovery. So in that case, you actually want to use these non-deterministic systems to kind of, I don't want to say invent, but find the patterns that you're trying to solve.
Right,
Whereas
right.
previously it used to just be, well, here's a library of everything we know, and we can't deviate from what we know. So think about that opportunity of like, how do you use these non-deterministic to meet what you're trying to accomplish in different ways.
And because you don't know the answer necessarily that you're looking for,
you don't.
Right? So it's a very different, different situation. The other really, and as you said, the tools are as bad as they'll ever be today, and they're only going to get better. The transformation that I found is this getting away from RAG, this getting away from no memory, this getting away from it's a one-shot deal to, the models now are so much more sophisticated, so much more easier to add your own data, even as just a regular business user, whether it's pointing to a Google spreadsheet or uploading a PDF or whatever. It's completely changed the way these things are accessible to my data, to use the power the way that I want to use it on the stuff that I want to use it on.
Absolutely, and actually something I want to highlight too is Well, there's still techniques like RAG that might be applicable. Like we used to use that heavily, but now the context windows are so large, you just put the entire documents in the context window, it does way better. So like these are evolving rapidly as well.
Right.
But there's also tools like, let's take Gemini Enterprise, the application, where you could just point it at your data and it does all of that for you. And so it's almost treated for knowledge workers as a SaaS, where you don't have to go and build all these pieces from scratch. So like, again, back to the blueprint, and something that I hear a lot is, we'll be working with Googlers, and they say our companies or our customer is using OpenAI, and how do we like position Gemini Enterprise against it? And the easiest thing I do, and I use the blueprint for this, is we say, what is the use cases that OpenAI's Enterprise unlocks? And then what is the use cases that Gemini Enterprise app unlocks? And they look the same, and that's great. If you want an internal knowledge base and do search, perfect. Then as soon as you want to drop down to the next use case, you have to go and you have to build your entire stack from scratch with OpenAI, whatever you're going to put the pieces together. Whereas like Google has in their whole Gemini Enterprise platform, allows you to plug all these things together. So you could go from like low code, like you were talking about, how do I just plug my spreadsheet in and get the answer that I'm looking for, all the way down to how do I now plug 5 different systems together so I get the combined answer, all the way to now how do I take action. Like you can have that whole continuum, and Google provides that entire platform that's seamless. And the blueprint gives a great visual way of seeing it, that it's not piecemeal together, but it's a complete platform.
Right.
So that's another dimension I really want to highlight too, is when you're comparing product A versus product B, you can take it from like what the marketing says to what are the actual capabilities at each layer, at the data layer, at the software layer, at the agentic layer, so you can a clear picture of what it is you're actually going to buy and how it actually fits in your existing environment versus what the best marketing that department said.
Well, it's funny, that was a great segue. I was going to ask you about Gemini. We're here at Google Cloud Next, and it's fascinating to me where Gemini is popping up everywhere. So it isn't just a model for enterprises, it's just not a model for public sector, but I covered robotics and humanoids. The Gemini Robotics Foundation model, the world model they're building is crazy. It's such a powerful thing to have behind you guys. You must love having that in your back pocket.
Oh, I think Google's technology is the best. 9 years I spent at Google Cloud, from the early days of Google Cloud on, and my firm belief is that Google technology has always been the type of technology that you could use to make the impossible possible. Like, think about what we did for the initial space program and doing it again now, is that the technology, we have to invent it to unlock the ability to do something. And so the companies we worked with in the early days were able to use Google technology to do things that no other technology enabled. And I find this, and that's what led to creating our professional services company, is when you use that technology the right way, and you're standing on those shoulders of giants the right way, you could accomplish limitless capabilities. And that's what we love to embed inside of companies, not just the know-how, but the platforms and technology and the enablement at the people to go use it. And we see Gemini Enterprise as a great extension of that, is how do we now do the same thing for business users so we can meet them on day one with what they need, and then that whole continuum of those people building from low code, no code to low code to pro code. Like, it's the entire platform that helps them achieve those outcomes.
That's awesome. Well, Justin, it's a really cool concept. I can't wait to see how it develops and goes to market, because I think people need guidance, right? They need tools, they need basically filters. Help me filter through the mass to get to the solution so I can get something delivered to make everybody happy.
I'm excited to see how it gets used to and how people can elevate the conversation into the outcomes from just the nitty-gritty details.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks a lot, Justin.
Thank you for your time, Jeff.
All right, he's Justin, I'm Jeff. We're at the Egen Lounge here at Google Next, Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.